29th,
I need my
2024.
coffee.
So Mildred brought me my coffee earlier in my Braves cup. Yes, she did. Rob Browne here with you and Brenden Martin. Got a great show store for you today. Jake Wimberly down in Jackson, Mississippi, ESPN 105.9. The afternoon drive, he does the matrix, the numbers on college football like no one else. And we're going to be showing those to you today. We're going to look in SEC heavy forecast for the 24 season. And we'll be joined by Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net, Vince Ferrara, the sports animal in Knoxville. Hey, smash notifications in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen for YouTube. You'll get an automatic alert every time we run a show. Alert. And allow notifications on your Android or iPhone. Hey, get pen and paper handy. Here we come. Going to be a great one.
Pen and paper. Don't forget, if you're watching on Facebook as well, to go ahead and just click that like button. You'll get a notification as well. So
howdy, Facebook people. Go. Yes, sir.
Howdy all. Let's go.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with Jake Wimberly and Brenden Martin, our executive producer. We'll be putting up a lot of really cool graphics today, folks. So you might want to get pen and paper handy because Jake Wimberly dives deeper than 300 feet. I can tell you that. To get out great information. Jake, good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Morning, guys. I hope I heard Brenden say, I think I may have sent you the wrong file types, Brenden. Sorry about that. Making you
No, it's not you. It's the streaming stuff. I'm converting them as we go, so I will hopefully catch up to you. Thank you so much for doing it, though. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I was sending it to him last night on the fly. I pulled over on the way back from Memphis to the farm. I've been in the office all day, and I was like, man, we got to get so I'll make sure because we're going to do every time you come on, Jake, we're going to put these graphics up because you've got
every time
a lot of great information to talk about. Jake, first off, before we get into this football, SEC got 11 teams. That's the most ever for the tournament. What does that say about the three that did not make it? They don't have pitchers. What can you pinpoint it?
No, they just don't have the dudes, right? I mean, they've got pretty good dudes. They just don't have good enough dudes. And look, when you look at Texas and Oklahoma, they're in this field as well. So you can't count that towards the SEC allotment, but you're getting two other really good baseball programs in next year. So it's just, look, it's a Hunger Games of sorts in the Southeastern Conference. And you've got to have the dudes. And look, the three that didn't have it this year, there may be three next year that doesn't have it. It's quite a sight when you watch SEC baseball.
Well, and it is, especially with Ole Miss and Mississippi State for a couple of years. I mean, they win the national championship in Starkville in 21, and in 22, Ole Miss does it, and then they both struggle. But look, Mississippi State, there's something about them and Ole Miss. It's the state of Mississippi, which is the pinnacle, the center of the University College baseball. So and I think this is going to be fun. We got this until late June, so it'll keep us busy. Late June, wrap up college baseball. Then July 15th, we start SEC Media Days. And after that, you're 2 weeks out from practice. So this stuff we're gaining really fast. We are about 9 weeks away from the start of college football practice. So you've got a lot of information. We got into it last week, but there's nothing like the visual. So Brenden, whenever you've got anything ready to pop up there,
well, tell me what you guys want, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Jake do it. Yeah, exactly. So Jake, kind of lead him so we get this right.
Yeah, so, from basically just kind of real quick revisionist history, what I do is come up with numbers that at the end of the day, each team is identified by a number. And we use simple numbers, 0 to 100, 100 being the highest, 0 being the lowest, and then wherever you fit into that, we can take those numbers and formulate, power rankings, and then we can also project schedule, win-loss type stuff. We can do stuff with Vegas stuff. And now this stuff starts to move. The model starts to change once the season starts, because at that point, about week 3, once we have about 3 weeks worth of data, then I can start putting numbers into what I call my college football playoff projector poll. So we can start really pinpointing, in kind of dialing in on who's really doing what. But several things that I sent you guys. One is talent goes into this. We'll start with the talent, the 3-year talent metric. And of course you can see that there. Now, again, this is straight numbers guy here. This is straight off a spreadsheet. So, not a lot of fancy graphics. I need to probably get some interns in here to do that. But so what I look at
that looks good.
It's all right. It's info. It's hardcore. It's how we do it here.
It's data, Jake. It's numbers. As an engineer, we love this.
Yeah. So what you'll see here in the way we used to do this, and I say we as in like the industry, people that do this, there's others, Bill Conley, Kelly Ford, Dave Bartu, several others that do this kind of stuff. Everybody does it a little differently. You'd use a 3-year or 4-year recruiting metric. So I've always used a 3-year talent, what I call HG hourglass composite, but then you have to start figuring in the transfer portal. And again, this is kind of a moving target, kind of a beta test right now, because we still don't have enough data to know how the transfer portal is affecting everybody as a whole. But what you'll see here that's interesting, Alabama, Georgia still right at the top with some of the best talent in the country, but Texas not far off. And what's interesting about this is Texas. And look, you take, for instance, Ole Miss at 84.5 and then Alabama at 91.72. That's really the difference of about 2 players. It's not that big of a gap. So when you get into the talent, and this is what I've used this year, it's kind of a 2-year roster churn plus 2 years of transfer portal. Well, look, this thing could go south. I mean, I have no idea, but this is the way we're having to kind of play with it with the transfer portal. Oklahoma still and Texas come in with some of the best roster talent, LSU as well. And of course, you can kind of look down through here and see. And I think if you just kind of look at it, think about your SEC football teams, this kind of makes sense. Alabama, Georgia at the top, Texas right there, LSU always at the top, Auburn sitting pretty close to the middle, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and that middle group from LSU at 87.46 all the way down to Kentucky at 79.64. If you kind of look through the schedules and see, the talent is not that far off, and you can see that on a given Saturday. And you can take that one down if you want to. But Rob, and I'll let you talk about the talent real quick, but the talent is not that far off, and Saturdays indicate that, because you'll look up and you'll see a 1-possession game with, like last year, Auburn and Georgia, or you may see Kentucky and Mississippi State play a 1-possession ball game. You see it every Saturday, and I think those graphics kind of indicate that.
Well, you do, and you look at the talent gap, as Chuck Oliver talked about. Between when Hugh Freeze took that job December, right around Christmas of 22, the talent gap between Auburn and Alabama was the widest it had been in 41 years since the time Pat Dye took over. He closed that gap quickly with the class in February of '82 that included Bo Jackson, Allen Evans, a lot of turned out to be great players, a lot of future NFL players. So you can do it even faster now with the way the portal is. And I noticed that Auburn, Georgia goes down to the last drive, and that's not coincidence. And I think if you're Kirby Smart and you're Nick Saban, Nick Saban's retired, you're going, wow, Hugh Freeze is taking this ragtag roster of Auburn with maybe 2 SEC caliber offensive linemen and playing us down to the end. They just got to learn how to win again. Now, on the flip side, I look at Mississippi State. I look at that program, and they're never going to get credit for having a lot of players, but they always do. And Vanderbilt with Barton Simmons, they're trying to go out and find a lot of diamonds in the rough, but they're now becoming, I hate to say this, like a AA or AAA farm club that's just getting players ready to go to upper tier SEC schools. How do you combat that? Can you?
I don't know that you can. not in the current construct, because take Vanderbilt, what you're saying, and look, I think I've always said I applaud what Barton Simmons and them are trying to do up at Vanderbilt. James Franklin did it as good as anybody. That's kind of a different era of football. But I don't know that you can do anything under the current construct. And what I mean is the way the collectives are set up, Vanderbilt's not going to have a robust collective. I mean, they got tons of money, but I don't know how much they really care. about their football program. They may care more about baseball. I mean, we know that, but I don't know that you can combat it. You just have to do the best that you can. But you even see, for instance, if you don't believe offensive and defensive line matter. I mean, just this past week, Hugh Freeze brought in late, not Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin brought in late a defensive lineman from, I believe, Jacksonville State. Or
yes, correct.
So continuing to add depth via the transfer portal, because at the end of the day, that's where Ole Miss got beat down last year against Georgia and Alabama was in the trenches.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the folks down in Gainesville, at Florida. You go, how can you not have one of the top 3 rosters just by location? But they don't. Dan Mullen wasn't a big fan of recruiting. Now, nobody's as bad as Brian Harsin, but the potato famine is over. And you've got Billy Napier, who's a hell of a recruiter. Where's Florida lacking the most, in your opinion, and how quickly you think can they close that talent gap?
Well, when you look at Florida, and I'm going to go back over here and look at, they're not that far off. And here's what's interesting about Florida, and we'll get into the schedules. But when you look at the talent in Florida, I mean, Florida, the problem with Florida that I see is more so the transfer portal, in that they've had just as many guys out as just as many guys in. And I don't know that they've replenished, some of the guys that they have lost out. For instance, you lose ETN to Georgia. Did you really replace an ETN who will go to Georgia and be in that 2-3 rotation? Mm-hmm. So I think they've just got to continue to find playmakers. There's playmakers that they don't have. But if you took Florida and the same roster that they have today and you gave them Missouri's schedule, our outlook on Florida this year may be totally different. Okay. Because Missouri's schedule is at the bottom of the Southeastern Conference. I was talking with Kelly Ford about this yesterday with K Ford Ratings on my show, and he does very similar stuff to what I do. Is that, if you look at the schedules, I mean, Missouri and Georgia have arguably the easiest schedules in the conference this year, where Florida and Georgia have the hardest. Yeah. And scheduling matters. I mean, it really does. That's why I've always told people, don't apologize for, a week non-conference schedule, because not everybody, look, if you say you want a big boy schedule and then you get one, don't cry about it. Not saying Florida's crying about it, but Florida has the biggest of big boy schedules I have ever seen.
Well, at least in name it does, and they're going to open up with Miami in the Swamp in that first game. But again, that, like we said, that's assuming everything is static and there's no movement in the aisles in Scott Field and Starkville, Mississippi. I mean, but there'll be stuff that happens. All right, Jake, you take the wheel, man. Let's go to your next level of discussion, because these graphics are demonstrative and they make sense. The correlation between that talent number, that figure, and what you see on the field is absolute. It's right.
Yeah, let's go to the coaching. Let's go to the coaching graphic, and I'll tell you how I do coaching, because recruiting is just one piece of the puzzle. It's a big piece of the puzzle. You got to have players. But if you look at coaching and the way I do coaching, people do it differently. A lot of people just rank coaches based on lifetime achievement. I am not a lifetime achievement coach ranking kind of guy. I look at, the last 3 years of a coach. I think there's a 3-year churn. And I think I sent that to you, Brenden.
No, I don't have one on coaching. I have standings, talent, and strength of schedule.
Standings, talent, and strength of schedule. Okay, but let me just go through the coaching.
Yeah, and you can email it to me now. I could put it up. It's whatever you want to do. It's fine.
Yeah. Let's see. If I go into the coaching, and I'll just send this. We can talk about this another day. But when I look at the coaching, the way I do it, and apologies for that, is I do it on a 3-year churn. So, because coaches, change, drastically. I mean, you look at Dan Mullen, the way he looked when he was at Mississippi State versus when he got to Florida, and then how that thing kind of rolled downhill after a New Year's 6-day bowl game. So, and I can't, quantify top 25 wins, top 25 losses, what you do on the road, what you do against out of conference teams. Did you lose a game against, a lesser opponent, maybe an FCS opponent or a group of 5 opponent? And of course, Kirby Smart sits at number 1 in the conference. You can't see this, but I'm just reading this off my spreadsheet. He sits at number 1, no surprise, with a 3-year metric of what is ranked at 30. He has a metric score of 33. For context, that is the highest in college football. Kalen DeBoer does come in number 2 in the conference, tied with Brian Kelly at 20 or 19.5. Lane Kiffin, number 4. Steve Sarkisian at number 5. Josh Heupel, 6. Hugh Freeze, 7. Mike Elko's 8. Mark Stoops 9, and then we go down the list for Drinkwitz, Venables, Levy, Beamer, Pittman, Napier, and Clark Lee. And for a coach typically that is new like Levy, what I do, if it's an offensive assistant coming in, it's got a little bit different identifier. Defensive coordinators as coaches a little bit different because we have to have kind of a base number. But right now it's still Kirby Smart, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, and Kalen DeBoer.
Makes sense to me. I mean, and you look at Kalen DeBoer, what he did beating Oregon, 3 times? And Dan Lanning is everybody's favorite son. He's 37. He is a rising star. There's no doubt about it, we think. Okay? But Kalen DeBoer, this guy's completely different. The last guy that replaced a legend like that, Ray Perkins, came from the NFL and pissed everybody off from the get-go by taking down Coach Bryant's tower. I don't see Coach Kalen DeBoer doing that. He's from South Dakota. What I like about him is, as Greg McElroy always said, he was driving the bus just a few years ago, Division III, chalking the field, selling concessions, raising money. He's from South Dakota. Again, those people up there, they're different, but you're seeing more and more people from the Dakotas migrate down here, and their model works. Okay, let's go to the next thing. You got graphics. I think that coaching stuff is powerful.
And I'll get you
really
that. Brenden, tell me what else you have over there.
I've got, let's see, standings, strength of schedule, and rankings.
Let's go to the rankings. Let me pull that in there and let's see what we got there.
Sure.
Because that may have some extra data on there. See how I tagged that yesterday. And apologies again. I was trying to send that to you in the middle of doing a show yesterday.
I know
that's the wrong one. That was the one we
the
just
talent
had
coach. Yeah. And Jake, I appreciate that. I noticed that at 5:29, I'm going, he's on the afternoon drive. So
well, that's our regular season standings. We'll come back to that.
And we have strengths of schedule right here.
All right.
Okay.
Let's just go with strengths of schedule because that does matter. You look, and so those numbers are just cumulative numbers based on the metrics that I have for each team, and you'll see Florida way above everybody else. I mean, that 1,300 number is way higher than Georgia, but then Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina, Alabama, down the list we go. And so again, if you look at Ole Miss, and again, a lot of people expect Ole Miss in the playoff. I expect them in the playoff.
Wow.
That schedule is one reason. I have Tennessee in the playoff. That schedule is another reason. So, just some interesting stuff. And I think you'll see other people that put out schedule rankings. They'll look very similar to this.
Wow. Brenden, Florida, it's backed up by those numbers.
Yeah. A lot of people are, excuse me. I've seen some of this stuff with, obviously, because, we're so close to the program, but, it's very true in the sense of, they are, on paper, Florida looks, pretty damn good going into this season. Yeah. And I don't think that was ever sort of my issue or whatever. The issue sort of becomes, like Rob, you and I have talked about leadership. Yeah. And it comes down to coaching and scheme and all of those things. And I think that's, that's what will remain to be seen is what Billy does. Who do we have on it, Rob, that was talking about, Billy and coaching? He's like, look what he did with AR. Who is that? What's his name from On3? I think said that. He said,
you're talking about JD PicKell.
PicKell, yeah.
Yeah. Great guy. We're going to get him back on soon. All right, here's a question I have for you, Brenden. You know this. You've forgotten more about the Florida program than we all know. You're very close to it. You never are going to look at a Florida team and not see a lot of great athletes. No. So it's just, to me, it's like coaching them. Jake, man, I love having you on this show. By the way, thank you so much. He's over there working on the computer.
Well, I know he's probably emailing me. Yeah,
I just sent Brenden an overall metric table.
Perfect.
And if you want to pull that in, that's got every bit of data in one stop shop.
Okay, so we got the metric table. Yep, got it right here. Okay, cool.
Sorry about that, Rob.
No, Jake, listen, thank you so much. And folks,
Rob said what you just said to me, and we were just talking about Florida, and we were just, when you were working there, and I think Florida, Rob made the point that Florida is going to always sort of be stacked, right? It's Florida. You're going to have, talent, for the most part, at least you hope you do. Although one guy going into the NFL is not such a great number last year, and it also shows a lot of people say that was, shows that the bins were dry for Billy and that he really had nothing. What are your thoughts on, personnel and coaching and the marriage of those two things to have success and get W's?
Oh, I think it's very important. I mean, when you talk about, especially, for instance, if a coach is a diehard, true believer in a certain system, let's just say a defensive scheme or an offensive scheme, then that's going to be equal, much more important. You take a coach that he's dead set he's going to run the zone read, for instance. Dan Mullen going to run the zone read. Got to have a quarterback that's 6'2", 6'3", 240 pounds. Then you've got to go find those players where. You take a guy like Lane Kiffin or maybe even Steve Sarkisian, they kind of take the putty and mold it a little bit.
Yeah.
You look, I think those coaches have a little bit better room for success, maybe a higher ceiling, but, definitely regardless, I mean, you've got to have players. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you are. If you don't have the players, you can only go so far.
Well, I mean, and Steve Spurrier, we talk about that. I mean, have in the past a lot about Steve Spurrier was one of the guys was like, I'm going to draw this up in the sand, in the dirt, and you go out here, you go wide. This is what's happening right now. We're going to go out and play football. Whereas you've got even Billy Napier, who is a very organized CEO type minded human being. He audits his day. Every day he writes down. I've seen it. Went to a year and a half ago press conference about how he literally takes notes of each entire day. The first thing he does when he wakes up in the morning is he reviews that day from last year, and he decides how they can get that day better. So he's always trying to fix those things. How applicable is that? In a sense of scheming, and also not having an offensive coordinator up in the booth who's, although, which I've, heard Urban Meyer say, I'm never winning national championships without Dan Mullen in my ear. Kind of, if you don't mind, sort of, what are your comments about that?
I think coordinators are you've got to have good coordinators, right? I mean, you've got to have guys that can, we're way past the day of a head coach running the whole show. I mean, you're just as good as your offensive and defensive coordinator is. And, it's got to be the right pairing too. For instance, you take a guy like Mike Leach, rest in peace. He always had to have a guy that could scheme and play defense to match the pace at which they ran offensively. Kirby Smart, you take him. I mean, that everything matters as far as your offensive and defensive coordinator. I think that, Rob, is extremely important.
Yeah. All right. Let's put some more graphics up there.
Yeah, I've got your metric table here, so we can pop that up there. So
there's a lot going on in this metric table, and this just kind of gets you everything that's involved there. You'll see to the left teams. There's the recruiting. There's the coaching. There's the quarterback play. Offensive ODE ranker. Don't worry about that table. I've kind of scratched that because I'm doing some things differently. But what that OD is, your offensive and defensive efficiency rankings. So you can see, for instance, and then of course the HG metric is the number that I use. All of this is put into an algorithm, and then that's how we get the number of the yellow. But
cool.
So you can see the coaching and the recruiting. So you can see, Rob, some of those numbers with the coaching. It's not in necessarily order because each team is different. What that order of team is based on that metric in the yellow. So you'll see Georgia's at the top, followed by Texas. Now, that number right there, 152.57 and 135, that seems like a larger number. I mean, you're talking about 17 points, but it's really not that large. As a matter of fact, if I take those two numbers right now, and I look at, and I just put this in a formula real quick. I mean, that means Georgia right now on a neutral site is about a 4.5 point favorite right now, today.
Right.
Georgia
over Texas.
Over Texas. Yeah. And you can go down the line there. Alabama, Ole Miss, even at Ole Miss at 128.5 or 128.9 in that Alabama game right now, if they played Alabama on a neutral site game, Alabama would be like a 2-point favorite. Wow. So the numbers are not that far off. O&D rankings, that's your offensive and defensive scoring efficiency rankings from last year and kind of what they were. So Georgia last year was 3rd offensively, 12th defensively. And the reason those numbers are so important, we'll see how that scales into the 12-team playoff. In the 4-team playoff, if you were not both units about ranked 15th nationally and you just about didn't make the playoff. You
Correct,
saw
yeah.
some outliers. For instance, when you look at Texas last year, they were
Barely.
17th offensively, right outside that number, 8th defensively. You look at Alabama last year, 18th and 9th, they were just right there. Whereas if you compared it to, and I don't have it on the screen, but if I went over to my Big Ten sheet, Michigan was sitting there at like 1 and 2. Washington was, I think, 2 offensively or 1 offensively and like 25th defensively. So their defense was outside that number, but they still made the playoff. And a lot of that was going to be on Michael Penix. So there's a lot of different ways to look at the numbers without just confusing people with a lot of numbers, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those numbers are so, again, they demonstrate they're true. They're actual. That Georgia, Texas, like you say, a 3.5, 4-point favorite. We did this last night on Buddy Martin's show, went over some lines. But yeah, this is valuable data that everybody needs to be paying attention to. If you're outside the top 15 in those 2 matrix at the top, you barely made the playoffs. It looks like 18, and you had Michigan and Washington were low single digits, and Washington's defense was like a 25, so that bit them on the ass there in the national championship when Michigan just lined up and just ran the ball down their throat.
It did, and then the talent differential too. The talent differential really showed up in the national championship game, and I think most people knew that was probably going to be the case. I mean, Michael Penix unbelievable quarterback, but he can only do so much.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes a new football coach shows up. It's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We're on the island of misfit toys. I've got a quarterback who can't throw a fade route. I'm a receiver who can't catch. I'm an offensive lineman who can't pass block. That's what you got a lot of. Hey, Jake.
I feel like we need that. We need that cartoon. Hi, Dudley Dawson. What's up, bro?
Dudley, let me tell you what. Dudley is wearing
man.
The Jimmy Buffett, Bill Walton shirt in honor. I'm going to
the
miss Bill
gold
Walton.
Chain is
I love
hot.
it.
I just feel like
man.
you need a hoop earring, and my favorite question in the history of time that you asked when you were about 3 shows ago is what's your safe word? That's what you came in with. That's what you started the show with.
Yeah, I mean, Dudley.
What do you have to say for yourself, Dudley? I mean, come on.
I love it.
Hey, Bill was a little bit more free-spirited than me, but I always enjoyed him saying what he felt, whether it was accurate or not. And I have been known to do that once or twice. So, I just thought
I love you.
The worst thing I'd ever want to be is boring. So
you're not.
I passed that this morning. So
we talking about Bill Walton last night, Dudley and Jake on the Buddy Martin show. Everybody said, "What's your favorite memory of him?" I know as a kid in Memphis, he broke our hearts, 21-22 against Memphis State at the time in St. Louis. Jake, before you go.
We have one more graphic.
Yeah, we got some. Dudley, Jake has put up some incredible numbers, and it's going to be saved for the show. But it's really powerful stuff. Let's put up one more set, and then I want Dudley's response to it because
it's the standings, right, Dudley?
Yeah, Dudley is a cerebral man.
Sorry, the standings one was probably this is the last one we have here.
Yep. And I'll answer Perry's question, Rob. He wants to know where I had Michigan last year with the numbers. I had Michigan winning the whole thing. I had Michigan back in, I think, April when I launched this. Winning the whole thing.
You did.
Now, I had them beating Georgia. That didn't work out. But, I did have Washington in the playoffs. So you'll see this is just regular season numbers. I have Texas going undefeated. That could change, obviously. These live, probably win a game or 2 off, but Texas undefeated with Georgia 11-1. But I do have Georgia defeating Texas in the SEC championship game. I've got Ole Miss going 11-1. Tennessee 10-2. You can kind of look down the list there. Now that could change a game or 2 again for Florida. And, I've gotten a lot of smoke, rightfully so, from Florida fans about that 2 wins. But when you look at Vegas sitting there at around 4.5 on some win totals, 5, and again, a lot of that's going to come down to, can Florida beat a Central Florida? Can they beat Miami to open the season? If they do that, then that thing will change. But Rob, guys, Dudley, Brenden, when you look at this, I think we're going to be box heavy in the middle with a lot of teams from LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Auburn, Texas A&M, Alabama, all the way down. It is going to be a murderer's row, I think, for a lot of teams. And that's why, talking with Kelly Ford yesterday, we both tend to agree on this, is I don't know that the SEC is going to get the teams in the playoff that they think, because if let's just say the ACC has a couple teams with a one loss on the season, or the Big Ten has 2 or 3 with one loss on or 2 losses on the season. Somebody in the SEC is going to get left out that thinks they should be in.
Wow, that is put a billboard up on I-40 going over the bridge into Memphis. On that, you'll have traffic jam. I mean, that is awesome. That is I mean, you hope if you're Florida, you hope you're better than that. But Jake,
hey Vince,
wow,
what's up, Jake?
How are you, buddy?
Good to talk to you, bud.
You too. So again, feel free, Rob, to pick those numbers apart. That's why we put them out there.
Yeah. Dudley, jump in.
I was saying, Vince, did you not get the memo this morning about the tire?
Bill Walton and Jimmy Buffett honor. I like that.
Yes, definitely. Hey, I tell you what, there's nothing. I'm sure there are Arkansas fans who are so excited that another 2 great football teams are coming into the conference, and as they try to rebuild, they have to fight uphill against that. Obviously, the goal here, I would think, for most fans, is to be improved, to have some hope. We'll see if that comes to fruition. I see those win totals, and I see that's probably about right. Although I will say that in this day of portal transfers and all that, it seems like half the team, although it won't be that many as it was last year, half the team is new, so maybe the new guys do something different, which would be better. And we all know that one of the biggest hopes they've got is that Bobby Petrino could catch some magic with some of these guys.
Yeah, Vince, we put out that rankings. He put out a matrix of all the teams in the SEC. He's got Tennessee picked. I don't know if you saw that at 10-2. Jake, you put a lot of that on Nico Iamaleava. I did it again 3 weeks in a row.
Well done.
Thank you.
100%. Look, I think you have to put it on the quarterback. Vince can speak more of this than I can. I think when you look at Josh Heupel and the recruiting that Tennessee has done, and then you look at the schedule also, I think it's a schedule that Tennessee can navigate. And for me, a lot of people are looking at Missouri, and rightfully so, as that extra SEC team in. And for me, it's Tennessee. It's not Missouri this year. Yeah.
Jake, I know you're on a tight schedule, and listen, thank you for going along with this. But how do people keep up and follow all this great work you're putting out?
Yeah, just find me on X at Jake Wim. And of course, you can listen to the show 3 to 6 on the zone1059.com. And CFB Hourglass is that website. There's a lot of team previews up. There's a lot of this stuff that's up there. You can go find it. And of course, we'll continue to push this out, especially once the College World Series moves away.
Yeah, and I remember when you were on the show, you did pick Michigan last year. And I won a Michigan hat from my friend TK because I picked Michigan to beat Washington. I said, they'll beat them by 3 touchdowns. He goes, you really think so? I said, man, they're really good. But you were right. Jake, thank you. Let's do it again next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You bet. Guys, Vince and Dudley, y'all take the wheel here. Just looking at numbers, it gets you excited. You talk about Arkansas, Dudley, and you talk about Tennessee, but y'all know this conference really well. We know we got 11 teams in baseball. Let's shed some light on the baseball right now and start with Vince on Tennessee and then Dudley on Arkansas. But Arkansas in the last 7 years has won more games in Division I than any other baseball program in America. They still hadn't won the national championship. So they both, in Tennessee, holy cow, these last 3 years, where do you start, Dudley? Vince, I'll start with you.
Well, it's unprecedented. Tony Vitello in Tennessee, they won 50 games 3 times. They'd only done it twice in their history prior to that. You're talking about 3 of the last 4 years. Wow. You're talking about winning the regular season and SEC tournament championships, each in 2 of the last 3 seasons, doing it in the same year. And we just haven't seen this kind of success. And, oh, by the way, the league is as good, if not better, than it's ever been. You talk about the consistency against the tough competition. Tennessee's best for the best competition. And Burke, one of their players, and there's a lot of great players, but he was the MVP of the SEC tournament. They came out of the losers bracket to win. The numbers go on and on, and what Tony Vitello has. So You can't say enough about it. Certainly, you want Tennessee to erase what happened 2 years ago, because I know that still stings for some fans and them not getting to the College World Series when they were so dominant. But this is a different Tennessee team. They're more battle tested this year, winning a number of series 2-1 versus just pummeling a lot of teams 2 years ago and having those expectations. Tennessee has made it to the College World Series when they haven't had the expectations of being one of the top seeds overall. But this is a different type of Tennessee team as the number one overall, and obviously will be talking about how that hasn't been done with the number one overall national seed win national championship since 1999. So, but this Tennessee team doesn't think about down the road. They're not thinking about potential matchups in the Supers or College World Series or any of that kind of stuff. That's how they're able to have success in the SEC tournament, by just taking not only a game at a time, but a situation at a time. And I think that's the way this team is kind of wired, which would, no guarantee, but would bode well, I think, for them to have postseason success.
Yeah, Dudley, Arkansas, another hot program, one of the hottest, like Tennessee, in the country.
Yeah, and here's what I would say. I've heard of a lot of coaches, and I think College of Charleston coach was, maybe the one that brought this to attention. He got fired when he was 13-17 in the SEC. This year he wins over 40 games, and I feel for those guys. I really do. I mean, I think maybe they should have got in, but I don't think at the behest of the 13-17 teams in the SEC, who are all really good and who all have the opportunity. I mean, let's be regional and host a super regional, and it's I'm sure that Mississippi State is going down, not getting host, going down, and going to be doing their best to get out of that regional, which is matched up with Arkansas. Arkansas obviously was one of the more dominant teams in the country over the course of, I'd say, up until the last 11 games, when they just won 4 out of their last 11. 3-7 in the last 10. A little bit of flux there, but they are playing at home where they're 33-3. That's what you play all year for, is to get to this point. Yeah. You're going to have to play a tough team. It's going to be a tough regional, and each of these 11 SEC teams is faced with that. But, man, you're prepared after going through 30 games of playing against teams where there just wasn't a break. Even with, the teams that didn't get in, they fought you tooth and nail to be able for you to have to win those games on the weekend.
Yeah, and it looked like every team in Hoover really was serious about improving their resume, but that was some of the best games throughout Tuesday through Sunday that you'll see all year long. So that's a sign to me. Well, you had the top 3. It's never happened before, Vince. Top 3 seeds in college baseball. What? Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas A&M.
It's incredible. And going into the SEC tournament, they were all in different tournament projections as possible number one overall seeds. It wasn't an automatic or consensus that Tennessee would be the number one national seed in those mocks, because Tennessee's RPI, I think, going into the SEC tournament was like 5. So some were giving it to Kentucky, some were giving it to A&M, but some were given to Tennessee as well. They took care of business going through what they saw in the SEC tournament. Now they're one in the RPI. There's no doubt about it, after being the most consistent team in the nation and being number one in all the polls. They won the last 9 SEC series. That's what that 2022 team did. It's incredible. It just did it in a different way, to where maybe it didn't wow as many people nationally. And they also aren't the lightning rod team that they were to many on the outside. It's different personalities, not that kind of team. The target is from them being so good and being the number one team. That's the biggest target. But it's impressive in what they were able to do in that SEC tournament, and getting that, being in that group of all the elite teams in the SEC there with those top national seeds. And then 5 out of the national seeds all of them in the top 8, and we haven't seen that before either. That was pretty impressive, also.
Yeah,
and Rob,
Dudley,
I usually agree with you, but I'm going to disagree on one thing. I don't think Arkansas showed up ready to play. I mean, after they got behind, they seemed to jump and flip the switch and all that. But I don't think they showed up ready to play. I think they got their SEC Western title. They knew they likely had a top 8 national seed, and I don't think things showed up with a sense of urgency. I think they've had a lot of talks after those 2 games, and between this time, I think they got some rest. I think they'll be ready to go. We'll see whether Hagen Smith pitches the first game or the second game. That's always a quandary for coaches. Do you send Hagen Smith out to beat Southeastern Missouri State, or do you think you can do that with some other pitcher? It's a gamble. Because if you don't win the first 2 games, then you're fighting uphill. You're playing Monday if you're going to get there. You just, you're taking a chance. But I think I agree with a lot of Arkansas fans who thought they seemed satisfied, went down there, got in a bunch of bullpens, and really didn't do, what they needed to do in terms of mentality and impressing the fans. Now let's see what they do this Friday. You're home again, 33-3. But I just, a long time ago, I quit, puffing it up a little bit. I just didn't think they showed up at all.
Well, no, I was going to say, for whatever reason, they looked kind of down. Hagen Smith had a rough outing, and he, was undefeated during the season. It was 9-0 starts, I think 14-0. They did not. You're right. I'm not going to disagree with that. But overall,
let me tell you one other thing. And I thought that it's interesting. A lot of coaches up here, Nolan Richardson, Dave Van Horn, Houston Nutt, have always found something to rally their team about. It's interesting that I think Hagen Smith's going to go out and pitch great this Friday because the SEC broadcasters on the game talked about how his velocity was down and all that. Well, it turned out it wasn't. The Major League Scouts said it wasn't. Arkansas's guns said it wasn't. It was the scoreboard, and they took that as valid. And so that's becoming a rallying cry. You got on our guy. You did this, did that. I think that people know that the fans and others are disappointed in what they did, and I think there's a mentality to that you have to have. You have to be. You have to face some adversity. You have to humble yourself if you're going to make the run that you want to make.
Yeah. Vince, Tony Vitello, golly, he was a 7th year at Arkansas, at Tennessee now, coming from Arkansas. This is 7 years. Mm-hmm. But again, 3 of the last 4 years, they've won 50-plus games. That is special. Kentucky, Texas A&M. It's a loaded field, and we all know July 1st we'll be welcoming Oklahoma and Texas in. Let's talk about Tennessee's regional, the teams in there.
Yeah, Southern Miss is the 2 seed, so there's your storyline because you're always looking for them. It wasn't as obvious as Texas going to College Station to play Texas A&M like they did in softball. Like, we all knew that was going to happen. But it's juicy because Tennessee went to Southern Miss last year, and there was plenty of debate of Southern Miss getting to host that regional, and there being plenty of issues there with it, and then the weather and all those kind of things, and the way they treated Tennessee fans while they were there. So, and Tennessee won that regional and went on to Clemson. So it was different. So that's one. As the number 2, look, they're consistent. 8 straight 40-win seasons for them, conference champions, just doing it in a very consistent, high-level way. So they play SEC teams all the time. They're not going to be intimidated, you wouldn't think, about this atmosphere, although it's going to be as hyped as it's ever been. They'll be setting attendance records like they have this year because of the first phase of expansion to Lindsey Nelson Stadium, and so it'll be rocking for sure. And then Indiana is the 3. They got hot late, coming out of the Big Ten as an at-large. They're a team that, for some, their RPI didn't warrant them being in the tournament. Their coaches came from Wright State, And so, Wright State is one that has a history with Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. Tennessee had a dramatic win on the Drew Gilbert walk-off several years ago when they were the 4 seed and Tennessee was the host. So Tennessee played Indiana a couple of years ago in Knoxville in a weekend series. So there's some familiarity with their coaches to Knoxville. The team that Tennessee will play on Friday is Northern Kentucky, the Norse making their first appearance in an NCAA tournament. They're a team that's been on Tennessee's schedule before, so that program has been to Knoxville also. Yeah. They haven't been the last couple of years, and as Tony Vitello, who joined us on the show this morning, mentioned, over the last couple of years where they haven't been on the schedule, they've gotten a lot better. So they've beaten some good teams, Mississippi State and Missouri. They didn't beat Georgia, but they were competitive in some of those games. So they also have been in SEC venues. So Tony Vitello mentioned they are not the 64th best team in the tournament by any means that's matched up with the number 1. We all know they do it because of geography and regionalizing it versus a S curve and having it match up from a fairness standpoint. That's, a debate on whether it's time for more of that. But that's the group that's here. I don't think it's an unfair gauntlet, but I don't think it's the easiest either. So it will be, and look, the target is on Tennessee's back. There's no doubt about it. We've seen plenty of teams this year play their best ball against Tennessee, and maybe making it difficult on Tennessee has been a good thing for them to go through this year with a little bit of bumps and bruises and then coming out better on the other side.
Yeah, and Dudley, you talked about Hagen Smith and what he's got mentally going for him, what the people on SEC Network saying his velocity's off versus what the scouts and the majors are all saying. We all remember NC State a few years ago coming in, and I always say this: you're most likely to get mugged in your own driveway at 3 a.m. because you're letting your guard down. It's just a natural human inclination to do that. But the crowds up there, just like they are in Knoxville, and Baum Stadium, Razorback Baum Stadium, it's 12, 15,000. I'm not the fire marshal, so I can make up whatever figure I want, but it's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere. It's an unbelievable 33-3. You got to guard against going, okay, man, we're at home. You want to have that mental edge to play like you're on the road. Yeah.
Absolutely. They've been here plenty of times. They've made it to the College World Series while being at home. They've also went on the road and had the us against the world mentality at Oklahoma State and North Carolina and figured that out there. Again, you want to play at home, you want to play in front of your crowd, but you can't take it as something for granted. You've got to be ready to play. I do think they've started to hit the ball better, which has been an Achilles heel for them this year. But at the same time, their pitching wasn't as magnificent as it was earlier in the year. This is a true regional, as Coach Van Horn pointed out. SEMO has been here, I think, played 16 times here over the course of the years. So it's while they may not be the same guys, that program is familiar with being here. Louisiana Tech is a program that fancies itself and should as a big time NCAA baseball program, one that's been in the NCAA tournament a lot here lately, one that's won a lot of games. And Kansas State is another team that has played a schedule that is pretty tough. There are no givens that Arkansas is going to get out of here. And again, these we've seen before in many situations in these 16, 14 regionals that the team going in there, the 4th seed, can cause a lot of trouble. Maybe not get out of the regional, but sure put some pain on the 1 or 2 that's supposed to get out of there.
Yeah, it is. This is Chad House, ECS House Industries, ECSHouseIndustriesInc.com. Check them out on the website, sponsoring this Razorback Report. And I was by there Friday in Cherry Valley, Arkansas. All the equipment lined up out there, 99,000 square foot warehouse. They're making the best agricultural equipment in the world. If you are a farmer, you know them, you know the name. They make the aerators for the catfish farms. Proud to have them as a sponsor. Vince, when you look at it, he talked about a 4 coming in. Some of these smaller schools, I think fans, let's be completely transparent. you pitch a Tuesday or Wednesday night game in the SEC. Once the league play starts, you're not pitching your Friday night guy or your Saturday. And so people can be deceived, but at the same time, you also have to not buy into SEC is so great. We just show up and go, boo, these other teams are going to be scared. What scares you or keeps you up at night if you're a Tennessee coach about other than Southern Miss, the teams in your regional?
Short term, you talking about for this weekend?
For this weekend.
Yeah.
Got to get through that. Yeah.
You just want guys not to be tight and tense and make too much of the moment. I mean, we saw how they performed on the big stage in Hoover, and look, it didn't go well the first day. They were blasted by Vanderbilt, but this team hasn't lost 2 straight since March, where they lost their only SEC series, and that was to Alabama. So yeah, they haven't been perfect. Now the difference is here: you lose one game, you have the ability to get up off the deck, but now your margin of error is gone because your season is on the line. So then does that add another level of tension or pressure to your players? But I think this team has shown enough toughness that I don't know that it keeps them up at night. Tony Vitello is thinking about everything and all the scenarios. He's joked about being single and how this is, everything for him for sure. So they'll go through all those scenarios, but it's more about their guys and them performing. Another thing they accomplished in Hoover, despite them having guys getting their specific work in during the tournament that they normally would, is they lined up their pitching for this weekend to seemingly be exactly what they're going to do, what they did during the regular season, what they're going to do this weekend, and having a combo in game 1 with Chris Stamos, the Cal transfer, and AJ Causey, the Jacksonville State transfer. And Causey's the one that goes deeper into ball games, and he was fantastic in the SEC tournament again. And then your second game, Drew Beam, really their only known commodity among potential starters, or in their, for a lot of their top name guys, and him in game 2. And then in a game 3, potentially was Xander Sechrest, who again was awesome in the SEC tournament, with Nate Snead there to be able to come in with his power arm and close out games. They also developed some guys in the SEC tournament that got more outs. They had 2 guys, Dylan Loy and Marcus Phillips. Both of them had recorded 1 SEC out during the season. Phillips went 3 innings to close out 1 ball game. Loy went 4 2/3 scoreless. So you add the outs there. And now there's a trust factor for you in addition to already having your pitching lined up. So this is about executing, about not having too much pressure. And then, as Coach Vitello told us on the show this morning, rest is a bigger factor this year than it was, the maybe last year, where they were exited from the SEC tournament quick and then had the extended wait. Now the rest is a key factor. So that's, I think, the biggest thing going into the tournament is rest and execution.
Yeah. Dudley, that's rest. I mean, people sometimes will say you go to Hoover and just take it out of there as early as you can and get rest. But, I mean, you go there really to win it. How rested up is Arkansas? Certainly is rested up. They've had more time. I mean, that's a given. Let's talk about that. And we got about 5 minutes to go. And also your favorite memory of Bill Walton, man, because I'm going to miss him. People said he was weird and all. Good. He's not normal. He's everybody else is trained to think and say the same stuff. He was not. And that's what made him unique and special and cool. And again, the nightmare when I was a kid against 21 or 22. And the one he missed was a dunk back when you couldn't dunk or something like that. I've never seen anything like it since.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Arkansas first, then Bill. The one of the positives, or a couple of positives that did happen in Hoover was Arkansas basically got everybody who's going to pitch this weekend some work in those 2 games. He was bringing them in and out of the bullpen quickly, getting everybody some innings of work. So it was a glorified bullpen. but they all got some work in. You saw Mason Molina, who has struggled with his command, with a second straight relief appearance in which he just threw strikes, didn't walk anybody, looked like the guy that he was supposed to be to start the year. So that's good. Brady Tigert, has been rested. He came out through one really good inning and then gave up a home run to Funky Cole Messina, who was just on fire. There were a couple of guys down there that you could threw it out of a cannon and they would have hit it out. But those two things, I do think that we've talked about being at home. We've talked about the pitching. I do think they're going to. Well, at least I should say, they hope that this is the weekend that Kendall Diggs comes out of his injury slump season that's been and does what he has done in the past in so many games and so many clutch moments here. So those are things that, have been able to, I think at least give them some positivity going in there. As far as Bill Walton, one of the greatest things that I ever got to do was spend 10 minutes with him in Brooklyn, New York, when he was broadcasting a tournament that Arkansas was in up there. Ironically, Rick Barnes and Tennessee were in that same tournament. Spent about 10 minutes talking to him too. But it's certainly a different 10-minute conversations. But Bill Walton was fascinated. Bill Walton was fascinated with my name. He had not heard of too many Dudleys, but he reeled off several that he'd heard of, and it was just you couldn't believe you're just sitting there talking, and it was somewhere between thinking this guy's loopy and this may be the smartest guy I've ever met. And he just kind of floated between there and that. There were a lot of people who used to complain about him being on ESPN. I up and watch or learned. What do, and I know his play-by-play guys were always entertained and challenged when working with him. But I agree with you. Back early growing up, living over there in Balch, Arkansas, just outside of Newport, I was closer to Memphis than I was to Little Rock. I got Memphis TV stations. I got the late night Memphis games that they would bring on at 10:30. I stayed up and watched those.
Channel
and
10.
I could not believe what he was doing. To Memphis. And knew from that point on that he was a heck of a player. Obviously, had to come through a lot of different maladies and situations to get where he was. Hate to see him go, but man, he lived a life. And he always had a saying, and I kind of like that for what I try to do. Basically try to live your life to make everybody else's day better. And, don't worry too much about yourself. And I think that was something that he did.
That was Bill Walton, man. We've run out of time, but I mean, Vince, Dudley, and Jake in the first part, and Brenden, unbelievable. Great stuff on this show. But I agree. Bill Walton, we're going to miss him. And Vince, we'll be watching you, and we'll do it again next week. Thanks, everybody. Watch this show live or at your leisure. God bless America. We are out of here. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Central.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are are for sale.